Congresswomen, thank you. Thank you very much. Quoting the president yesterday, you all are people who hate our country with a passion, you hate Jewish people, and you love enemies like Al-Qaeda. You hear those statements coming from the President of the United States to describe you all, and you were all lumped together, and you think what?
You know, I think it really kind of takes me back to what I learned about in grade school, I think about Ruby Bridges, and I think about this time when people who advocated for the most vulnerable were called anti-American. And I think about the fact that when people say, this is not America, I think that America has always been a story, and America has always been about the triumph of people who fight for everyone versus those who want to preserve rights for just a select few. And there is no bottom to the barrel of vitriol that will be used and weaponized to stifle those who want to advance rights for all people in the United States.
But I also want to remind people, right? It's a beautiful thing to think back to what America was and the kind of progresses we've made. But as we think about this person making this speech in the White House garden, you have to remind yourself that this is a man who spent $85,000 and basically called for the lynching of the exonerated 5 of Central Park, 5 young Black men. This is a man who questioned the Americanness of our previous president, who started the birther controversy. Our beloved First Lady still talks about how she can't forgive him. This is a man who has deep-seated animosity and hatred, who feels so small, who works so hard to make others feel beneath him. And so I think it is even ludicrous for us to have the space to dignify what he says with an answer. But and I just think it's really important for us to remember, as much as we've dealt with high school bullies, elementary school bullies, middle school bullies, we're going to deal with him in that way and make sure that we are not only resisting the detrimental policies that are coming from this administration, but we're going to do the work that the people send us to do and insist on pushing forth an agenda that puts all of us forward.
Yeah. I just want to say this. I am heartened, and we all are, encouraged and grateful for the solidarity that that has been offered by our colleagues, by our neighbors, and by people representing every walk of life since this happened. But I do feel that I'm sort of sitting from a place of privilege, that we could have this level of focus and attention about hateful tweets in the context of, you know, Eric Garner's mother today did not get justice from this Department of Justice. We can talk about and spin out on about hateful words, which are a predictable prompt by the occupant of this White House, and I call him that, not because I don't have respect for the Oval Office.
But it sounds like you don't have respect for the Oval Office when you call the President of the United States the occupant.
No, because he is only occupying the space. He does not embody the principles, the responsibility, the grace, the integrity of a true president. And so for that reason, I'm not dishonoring the office. He does every day. He dishonors it by appealing to the most base part of who we are as a society. But this is very predictable. This is a distraction. This is a disruption on our leading and legislating and governing on the issues of care and concern and consequence of the American people, that they sent us here. This is a distraction from the corruption, the chaos, and the callousness of this administration. How did we get here? We got here because of a policy debate on immigration. That's why we're here.
And I can tell you personally, I mean, I think as soon as I heard that, it wasn't really about us. I thought to myself, immediately I wanted to, and I put a video out telling all the residents in the 13th Congressional District that believed in me, somebody like myself, to serve them in Congress. I wanted them to know they belonged. I wanted that little girl that was inspired by all of us, in looking to all of us. I mean, young people just driving and just saying, thank you so much for running, because I can see myself in you. I want them to know that we're unwavering.
So
we are not going to back down.
when you heard the tweet that you did you take it seriously when you heard it? Or did you think, there he goes again, this is a distraction, this is a pivot? What did you think when you heard the tweet?
For me, I'm hearing about this from folks saying, did you see what the president just said? At the same time that I'm getting text messages from people saying, Rashida, what can we do? I heard ICE is now knocking on doors without warrants. I'm trying to represent my district. It's a very diverse district, 20 different ethnicities. And I'm trying to fight on their behalf, trying to make sure that they have a voice here. At the same time, I'm dealing with the biggest bully I've ever had to deal with in my lifetime, and trying to push back on that and trying to do the job that we all have been sent here to do, which is centered around the people at home. This is a distraction. This is a person that really wants to vilify, demonize not only immigrants, but even communities of color, as many of my sisters here have been talking about. It is very much a distraction, getting us unfocused. People want us focused on the policy, not this. And I can tell you, not only Democrats, Republicans are apologizing on his behalf. People in my community who are like, I disagree with some of your policies, Rashida.
Do you feel enough Republicans have spoken up against the president about those?
Absolutely not. I mean, we just held a vote today, and not a single Republican could bring themselves, no matter what their public statement or what their public gesture or public discomfort, they could not bring themselves to have the basic human decency to vote against the statement that the president made on the floor. And when people, when you asked, how did I feel when he tweeted that, to pull on what Rashida said, it wasn't a personal thing. It's the fact that I have been elected, and we have been elected to the United States Congress to represent, between the four of us, millions of people. Millions.
What message does it send, do you think, that very few Republicans have spoken out to condemn the president's words?
The normalization of it. The fact that it's against our core American values, that they're choosing him over country,
Ayanna,
choosing
what
him
message
over
does it send?
American society, like our values are, that's rooted.
But I care about the rejection, the denouncing, and the condemnation, not simply from a values frame or from a frame of being collegial, because this is an august body or a rarefied area that we're operating in. Less than 12,000 people have served in the history of Congress. And we each I feel a deep responsibility to honor that. But what I'm more concerned about are hateful and racist policies and the impact of those policies in the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District, which I represent, where in a 3-mile radius, life expectancy drops by 30 years and median household income by $50,000. I'm focused on equity and justice, and that's what I was sent here to do. And so,
So are you all saying that you are not distracted by the president's tweets, the president's actions?
No, and we cannot allow anybody to be distracted by it. There is a conversation that he gets to have on Twitter that gets to be had in the Oval Office that turns into policy. So when he, haphazardly says we should not allow we should put a stop into Muslims entering this country, and everybody says, oh my God, what such a racist statement, he's Islamophobic. We don't pay attention how that's connected to the policy that he has in literally now banning Muslims.
But he has a very big megaphone. He has a very big pulpit.
It's true, but I can't muster inflated outrage and feigned surprise about an act that is very consistent with who this person has shown themselves to be. We do not have the luxury of dedicating sweat equity and any more mental space to the occupant and these tweets. We have to do the work on the issues of consequence to the American people, that people are being choked by student loan debt, that people are rationing insulin, that people don't have clean drinking water and clein air, that we have a gun violence epidemic.
It's interesting that you all use the word distraction, that he is trying to distract away from real issues. You know, it's been said about the four of you that the four of you are a distraction, that you're a distraction to the Democratic Party, that you're playing right into the president's hands, that he is probably loving all of this controversy and this turmoil that is created. What do you say to people, and you have your critics too, who say that you all are also a distraction, that this is not how the game in Washington is played? What do you say? That there are better ways to get your message across and make your points? What do you say?
The insinuation of that question in itself is a distraction, because you have to think, right? There are people who were saying that the conversations between him and Pelosi was getting in the way of her ability to negotiate with the president. And that distraction was created by him because he is inept. He doesn't have the ability to negotiate. And the fact that we are not able to have an infrastructure bill was because of that. When we talk here, and as an example of how detrimental the Muslim ban is, as someone who comes from a country that is currently on the Muslim ban, or when we talk about his design to try to not get Muslim refugees into this country. It's gone down 91% since 2016 to have a visual representation of what Muslim Americans as refugees could achieve is a distraction he wants to create. When we're having a conversation about the crisis that he's manufactured at the border with his metering policy, with his family separation policy, with his wait in Mexico policy, and now the kind of humanitarian crisis that exists and the human rights violations that are currently happening, and the three of them go down there and then he starts calling us names, that's a distraction from the attention they are bringing to the
But I don't want to miss the point about the criticism about the four of you. I don't want to miss that point.
It's not about the criticism about us. I think he wants you to focus on that. And you should be asking, why is it that we are being criticized? What is it that we bring to this body?
I'll tell you what we bring.
Exactly.
We're an extension of a movement in our country that wants Medicare for all, that wants us to end mass incarceration, that wants us to push back against the attacks on communities of color. I mean, I think all of us have incredibly strong residents in our district that have spoke volumes in electing people like us.
And we are a disruption to the business as usual that's been Washington. Right? We were elected for that purpose.
Just add that each of us represent very different districts.
Yes.
Right.
And each of us bring our unique and authentic voice to this body. We govern in our own way. What we are four women who have an alignment of values, shared policy priorities, who have repeatedly happened to land in the same place on the issue of immigration. That is it. There is no insurgency here. There's nothing conspiratorial.
There is no insurgency here?
There is no insurgency and there's nothing conspiratorial. What we are four lawmakers who happen to land in the same place on the same issue time and time again, that are honoring the consistency of what we said, the promises we made, that were not hollow, because the threats and the insults and assaults, the palpable fear that our districts are living with is very real. My district is 40% immigrant, and I don't write a bill, and I've authored 5. I don't co-sponsor legislation, and I've co-sponsored about 130 bills. I don't cast a vote, and I've cast dozens of them, without conferring with the people with whom I really answer to. And that is my district. And I have the support of my district because of the vulnerability and the fear and the abuses of ICE in our district. And CBP is the largest law enforcement agency with the least amount of transparency and accountability.
I can respect what you're saying. I think the better question is, it's not so much the dispute you're having with the president, it's the distraction, the disruption that you're having with the Speaker of the House within your own Democratic Party. It doesn't seem that you are all on the same page. Is that a problem?
Well, I think, and it's always been my opinion, that in the raucous experiment of American democracy, that dissent and discussion is an accepted and necessary part of our system of governance. If we had two parties that were party line and every single person voted the same exact way and just followed commands of another, that is not in its very nature democratic. I think that there are some people that may say it's disruptive, but I don't think it's disruptive at all. We're doing exactly what we were sent here to do. We just had the close of a fundraising quarter. 84% of all of my donations come from small dollar donors, everyday people.
But when you say things like the Speaker of the House is being disrespectful to women of color, is it that she's being is she, according to you, being disrespectful to women of color because of your color, or because she doesn't like your policies or the tactics that you all are taking to make your point?
Right, and I'll clarify. I did not say that she was disrespectful of women of color. I found some of the comments disrespectful, and that was my personal opinion.
Okay.
And I did feel that singling out on the basis of one vote was creating an opening. But that doesn't mean that we fundamentally disagree or fundamentally disrespect each other's position and power and ability to be here. And that's what makes us united as a caucus.
But the perception, though, is, let me make this point because I think it's very important. The perception is that you were saying that Nancy Pelosi singled you all out because you are women of color, and that you felt disrespected by that.
And I think that personally, my personal take is that this is part of a larger dialogue, and that we don't know how to actually talk about race and talk about issues and talk about dynamics in this country. Because I think it's important to clarify here and to show and to highlight that pointing out inequity does not mean that you are calling something racist. It's pointing out an inequity. But we are so sensitive to these things because we don't know how to have these conversations. We don't know how to handle these dynamics. And it creates openings for moments like these.
Are you speaking to that? Are you speaking to Nancy Pelosi?
You mean right now?
Yeah, yes. Well, you're speaking to me right now.
Our teams,
but in general, are you in communication with her?
Our teams are in communication. Our chiefs are meeting.
But shouldn't it be a face-to-face with you
agree.
and the speaker,
Yeah.
as opposed to your people and her people?
Right,
Shouldn't it be a face-to-face with
We're
all of
missing,
you?
I think, the
We are
bigger
but we are new
point.
members
But
of Congress.
I know, but I want
we
you
are
to
new members
answer
of
that
Congress. But
question.
no, I'm very protective. So once
She does not need protection.
I know that.
She really.
But this is my
woman knows
view,
how to
too.
handle
This is
herself.
not personal. I
This
don't
is
think
not
we should
personal.
personalize
She
this
doesn't.
conversation.
Wait a second. With all due respect, she doesn't need protection.
All right.
I want to know if you are
she's
speaking.
the new member, not the speaker.
No, but I want
She
to
has
know.
every right to sit down with her in any moment, any time, with any of us.
Yeah.
She is Speaker of the House. She can ask for a meeting to sit down with us for clarification. The fact of the knowledge is, and I've done racial justice work in our country for a long time, acknowledge the fact that we are women of color. So when you do single us out, be aware of that and what you're doing, especially because some of us are getting death threats, because some of us are being singled out in many ways because of our backgrounds, because of our experiences and so forth. But I think
Alexandria,
the
are
question
you interested
should be,
in having a conversation face to face
Oh,
with
absolutely.
House Speaker
would-
Nancy
absolutely.
Pelosi?
why wouldn't she sit down with her?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and we've reached out to that end.
And you've reached out to have a meeting with her?
But Gayle, can I just say that this is a deliberative body, and I personally would never spot or question how any of my colleagues,
That's right.
in their deliberation, arrives at how they will ultimately cast that vote on the House floor. This is a representative democracy, and ultimately, notwithstanding the caucus and even our party, we were sent here on a mandate by our districts. And when we cast those votes, we cast them alone.
So were you
I would
offended
never question.
because the House Speaker said you all had 4 votes and that's all you had when she was talking about the is that what you
I'll
were
tell you where I'm
offended by?
on.
I'm going to get to you in a second. I can see you're very chatty. I'm going to get to you. But are you offended because she did not, because of the way that she responded to, there was the vote and it was only your 4 votes that voted against that bill?
We are in a Democratic majority. This is a huge freshman class. The only class that has rivaled us in size were the Watergate babies, against a very similar backdrop of corruption and chaos, right? And so because we are such a big caucus, there is a diversity of lived experience, of ideologies, even if we are fundamentally bound by the same core values. And for that reason, it is a representative democracy, and I would never question how a colleague arrives at that vote, because if they can defend it to their God, to their conscience, and to their districts, we take those votes alone.
Congresswoman Tlaib, do you regret, it was your first day, and you called the President of the United States, you said, we're going to impeach that MF. Do you think that that kind of language is helpful, and what did you hope would come of that?
No, I mean, from day one, I truly believe that he has committed impeachable offenses. And me, you know.
But even if you believe that, the fact that you called him.
But I didn't do it on the House floor. And I'm going to be unapologetic in myself. 70% of Americans curse. I'm real. This is who I am. I'm rooted in where I come from. And it's very common for me and for many of my residents to say things like that. But
so you don't regret,
folks, absolutely not. I'm unapologetic about it. I'm definitely going to push forward and saying we have to impeach him. But I think for me, growing up in the northern border, where I personally saw ICE stop people and ask them for their documentation, where I've seen the militarization of my community in Southwest Detroit, where, I mean, people jogging around a park, Gayle, getting asked and stopping, and where I've seen actual ICE come up to schools and trying to pick up parents from in front of elementary school, one in front of a daycare.
But
So
let's
this was
go,
very
let's go back to
personalized for me,
impeachment
but
for just a
I
second.
think-
Let's
I
go
think-
back to impeachment for just a second.
But I think that experience needs to be at the table of why I voted against
And why you feel the way you do.
Yes.
But on paper, you do not have the votes for impeachment. On paper, you don't have it. So what is the point of going through the exercise of impeachment when it doesn't look like it will go anywhere?
The Watergate class didn't have the votes in the Senate side. They didn't function from that place. They function in putting the country first, and they function in doing what's right.
Ayanna?
Gayle, if that were true, then we might as well just pack it up and go home. Why are we leading and legislating on everything from gun violence prevention to climate to consumer protection? Why are we leading and legislating and moving bills out of this House when they are not being moved in the Senate? You know, this is about our demonstrating a strength of conviction and acting on these issues of consequence to the American people. How many times did Senator Kennedy look to advance health care? So, you know, ultimately the victory, sometimes the victory is in the fight, even if you don't win in the official textbook way.
When the Nixon impeachment began,
Yes.
something like 67% Americans didn't believe in impeaching the president. And within 10 months, it was something in the lower 20s. And so right now we're at 57% of Americans don't believe in impeachment. And I believe within a few months we could probably get
AOC, I've heard people say, you know, you're new here. Shouldn't you wait and get the lay of the land to understand how Washington works?
I think one of the things that's funny, I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing at the sentiment, because
You've heard that sentiment. I'm not the first person that said that to you.
Absolutely
Yes.
not. But not just me, but the entire freshman class, I would argue, regardless of ideology, was sent here because Americans are sick of how Washington works. So why would I learn a broken playbook where lobbyists have taken over this place, where they influence all the bills, where we vote on things because that's how things have always been done here. Americans are not getting wage increases. Our government is continuing to sow dysfunction. Why would we operate business as usual when business as usual is not serving the public?
I heard you very loud and clear, Congresswoman Tlaib, where you said you were unapologetic, you were not backing down, which brings me to you, Congresswoman Omar. Do you regret, you know, you took a lot of flack for your comments about Israel, that it's all about the Benjamins. Do you regret that you said that? Do you wish that you had chosen your words more carefully? You're being accused of being anti-Semitic?
Yeah, I mean, regret wouldn't be the way that I would describe what I feel.
What would you describe?
I think, oftentimes there are things that you might say might not hold weight for you, but to someone else, right? The way that we hear and consume information is very different than how the next person might. I remember talking to Keith Ellison about some words that might hold weight for Black people, and I said, I don't know why that would be offensive. And he said, Ilhan, because you're an African immigrant, you might not understand. And so we have different, I think, ability an opportunity to learn from one another. And
So you don't regret your words either?
I do not, but I have gotten I am grateful for the opportunity to really learn how my words made people feel, and have taken every single opportunity I've gotten to make sure that people understood that I apologize for it. And
Would you like people to, would you like to make it clear that you were not anti-Semitic?
Oh, certainly not, yes.
Would you like to make that clear?
Yes, I mean, and nothing I said, at least to me, was meant for that purpose. And I have taken, I think, every single opportunity I've gotten to make sure that people understand that my work and one of my responsibilities is to make sure that we are dealing with the issue of anti-Semitism, that as I fight hard to deal with Islamophobia, that I'm going to do the same thing, because I understand that both of our communities are under threat with white supremacy, and I think it's completely unfair for that title to be attached.
But can I say, Gayle, I think some of the
Yes.
challenges, because our caucus is so big, and it's just, the old adage is true, and it certainly has been my lived experience every day, that you can't do good work if you're not in good relationship.
Right.
It is very challenging to be in good relationship, and I think, first of all, I challenge people all the time in their verbiage and their word usage to not use words like tolerance. No one wants to be tolerated. What we need to foster is understanding and empathy, and that's very challenging. We have long, intense days. We work at the end of the day on our lines of questioning for committee the next day. It is not an environment that is really conducive to fostering understanding and empathy and building relationship. And so all of us have to be much more intentional about that, because I think every single member here, and I mean in the whole Congress, not just in our caucus, stands to learn something from one another.
I like that phrase. I'm going to use it. I may not credit you, but
Okay.
you can't do good work without good relationships. I think that's very important and very key. And as we sit here today, there appears to be a fractured relationship between the squad, the four of you, and Nancy Pelosi. Do any of you think that relationship needs to be repaired, or that there needs to be work done to heal that relationship? Is there a fracture?
I don't feel a fracture.
Yeah, I don't. I think that just as there were members of Congress that did not vote for the speaker on the House floor the day of our swearing in, just as there are members who challenge her conclusions, who disagree with her, so do we from time to time. But that does not mean that there is a fundamental fracture or a dehumanizing going on within our caucus. This is, I think, after 8 years of a Republican majority, where they're used to the party being lockstep no matter how inhumane and how depraved the legislation they were passing was, we're not used to a governing majority that actually talks and dissents and debates and disagrees. And so we think, because we're used to 8 years of just following orders from the Republican caucus, when you see Democrats in power and we're actually willing to debate on issues and say we come from different places, we think of it as almost like, we think of it as bizarre.
Well, we haven't had 8 years of the Republicans, so we haven't had that.
Well, in the House.
Oh,
We haven't been in the majority for 8 years.
Right.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Facebook has a mantra, used to have a mantra, move fast, break things. Does that resonate with you all? move fast, break things?
I mean,
I
if
don't know about
we
breaking
are
things.
breaking
The Mob
systems of
Academy.
oppression, if we are breaking the gridlock in Washington, if we are breaking
like
the
thinking about
status quo,
growing and
then
nurturing
no, I mean,
and
I think
loving.
let's say we do want to break all of those
Yeah,
things,
but
right?
with love
and then
and
what we want to
respect.
do is we want to build a system that works for all of us. We want to make sure that we have an opportunity to be in relationships with one another. We do want to create a system that is of the people, for the people. Many of the policies that we advocate, whether it is Medicare for all, or canceling out student debt, or dealing with our climate crisis, most of those policies pull at 70% plus.
Do you
the
like being
American
called-
people are with
Because I know
us,
they got to go.
and
Do
I
you
think
like
it's-
being
it's
called the
great.
squad, and where did that come from? I've been looking. Nobody can tell me.
Okay,
Do you like being
I
called
can-
the
There's a picture and a
I offer
hashtag.
the genesis of this because again, it's
It was
nothing
Ayanna.
conspiratorial, very organic. So we, none of us had met. I mean, I had actually, Alex and I had met once before, and we showed up at new member orientation. We were asked to do an interview because we each represent firsts. In our own rights, right? And so we did this interview, and at the end of the interview, they said, "Will you all take a picture?" And we took a picture.
It was just the four of you?
Yes, because we were the four being
first.
interviewed as first. And at the end of that interview, we took the photo, and I'm not sure who said it, but just within the context of social media culture, said, "Oh, let's just do a hashtag squad goals or
it's
something."
squad
like
goals.
It was squad goals.
squad goals.
And then it morphed into this thing. But I've been saying in the days leading up to this moment that the reality is that anyone, to your point about it's not just about dismantling, but what we're intentional about building and fostering. Anyone who is committed to the work of building a more equitable and just world is a part of the squad. That's you, Gayle. That's anyone that wants to put in this work. And I do want to underscore work, because in 2018, there was a lot of talk about magic and waves. If there was a wave, we didn't ride it, we created it. And I wouldn't give short shrift to our magic. What we put in here every day is work. And so anyone committed to doing the work of a more equitable and just world is a part of the squad. It is so much bigger than us.
Let's wrap up with this. You're all new. Everybody pleased with how it's going, how you're playing it? You're no regrets, no do-overs, and everybody's okay with how it's going? Proud of the work you're doing?
I feel good. I feel immensely proud of the work that we're doing. We're sitting here, in the Oversight Committee of the United States Congress. Ilhan doesn't sit on a committee, but Ayanna, Rashida, and my seats are right there. And from there, we have talked about and we've gotten millions of dollars in refunds from federal contractors that have been defrauding the public. We have gotten PrEP HIV medication to go generic. We have impacted the lives.
Childhood trauma.
We have had Ayanna hosted the first ever hearing in American history in front of this committee, in front of the Oversight Committee on Childhood Trauma.
So as I listen to you for today, the squad, it doesn't sound like you're going to change the way you do business. It doesn't sound like you're going to change the way you do business.
Why would
That's
we?
all.
This is what our district
This
wanted
is our
us to do.
moment. This is the work we
but
got
our
elected
district
to do.
voted